Hi, everyone. I am going to invite Brooke. All right.
Yay!
Brooke.
Sheryl
Hi.
Sandberg, how are you?
All right. So I'm so excited, everyone, to be here with Brooke Baldwin, the former host of CNN Newsroom with Brooke Baldwin, one of the youngest women to have her own show on CNN.
Yes.
Brooke just wrote her first book. It's called Huddle: How Women Unlock Their Collective Power. And it's about sharing what's possible when women lean on each other. She interviewed so many amazing women of all backgrounds and industries. A friend of mine called me and said, "You have to read this book."
I love this so much.
I called Brooke. I cold called her. I was like, "Hi, Carol, I've heard about your book. I want an advance copy." She sent it to me. And then we agreed to do this today. So I want to start.
Cheryl Sandberg, if I may just interject and just say thank you. And for everyone watching and you know of the Sheryl Sandberg, but I seriously got this email a couple of months ago and it was like, Sheryl Sandberg would like to speak with you. And I was like, what's going on? And thank you so much. You were so generous and lovely and just real about the whole thing. And you were like, listen, my girlfriend raved about this book. I'm going to read it. I think it's, sort of lean in circle adjacent and like, let's have a conversation. And that's exactly what's happening right now. So just thank you. Seriously.
I'm here. I'm here. We're all here to help other women. Okay. So one of the things I most love about your book, and it's the title, so it's a great thing to love, is the title Huddle.
Yeah.
So, with Lean In, we started Lean In circles. We always had this concept of people leaning in together, but you really captured that, I think, in a better way than anyone really has with that word huddle. So
Thank you.
let's start right there. What
Yes.
does huddle mean to you?
Yes. To me, I was very intentional about picking the word, right? I wanted it to be sticky. I wanted it to be something that really entered everyone's lexicon. To me, huddle has a bit more of a masculine connotation, and I wanted to just flip it on the head and
There's a
feminize
football.
it. Yeah, I mean, I think about a bunch of dudes on the football field with the black under their eyes, and I mean, obviously, loads of women, many of them, were in my book, huddle as well, in athletic fields and courts, etc. But I feel like it has that connotation, and I wanted us as women to own this word. I wanted to flip it on its head. To me, it's like a huddle is where women are energized by the mere fact of our coexistence. So Sheryl, it could be like two women, 2,000 women, get it coming together, wanting to get done, or just quietly holding space for one another. That's huddling
So you and I are huddling
right now.
What I love about what this is that we were never going to make it on our own. No one makes it on their own. No man, no woman.
We were meant to be together.
We're meant to be together. But there's this really bad connotation out there that like women don't help other women. And one, I think that's outdated. And two, I think that's based on bad expectations. And three, I think it's not even true.
Hmm.
And so as you in this book and in your life suggest women supporting other women,
Yep.
give us the to do. I'm watching this. I want to go out there and support other women. What should I do?
Well, I truly, I think I was raised right. I truly believe in this ethos of, your success is my success. If we're together at the workplace and you want to rise, how can I help you rise? Who can I talk to so that your success becomes my success and my success becomes your success? Like, I love the Megan Rapinoe quote from a year or so ago where she said, throw down your ladders if you have that access to power. And I hear you on saying that you think maybe it's outdated that women can be the worst to each other, but you and I have chatted and we have been real about how, when we were coming up along in our own careers, there were some women who we looked to for guidance and help and leadership and mentorship that just didn't exist in a way that we wished it had. And I write about some of that in my book, not only just as a cub reporter and, coming up against another cub reporter 6 months, above me in my teeny market of Charlottesville, Virginia, and how I learned about sharp elbows really quickly, or even starting, at CNN and looking up to someone who I thought would help me more and didn't. Not to say that I didn't have other extraordinary mentors behind the camera, but, I do think that for so long there were so few women at the table. And I mean, especially imagine if you're as a Black woman, a woman of color, you know, really not having that seat at the table. And shame on us as white women for so long sort of looking out for ourselves. And inclusivity and being intersectional is such a huge theme in this book too. But, you know, I'm curious why you think that that's outdated. Do you not think women are awful to each other anymore?
So I think a couple things are true.
Yeah.
I think that we are often the only woman in the room. And I'm going to go back and ask you about your coming up the way at CNN. But not as much as we used to be. So if you were in, you know, a boardroom in 1970, and there was another woman who might be in that room, you were absolutely competing for the one slot.
Totally. Yeah.
You were. And so, you know, there was the queen bee phenomena, they called it, which was me competing. That's not true anymore. I genuinely think most companies would like to have more women, would like to have more women of color, would like to have people of color in the boardroom. Now, getting the right practices and policies to get there's another thing. But the second thing is, you know, we just expect greater kindness from women. I wrote a piece at the New York Times with my friend Adam Grant. Women, if a woman does a favor for someone in the workplace, she's expected to. Nothing, but if she refuses, it hurts her in terms of bonuses, promotions, ratings. If a man does a favor, he's high. He gets greater bonuses. We just expect women to do more. So when I was, and I had some, like you, pretty tough experiences where there were not a few women, not that many women above me, but I never worked for a woman, but there were senior women, and
yes,
some of them didn't help me very much. But when I was brutally honest about that, I realized most of the senior men didn't help me either, but I didn't expect them to.
That's, listen, you're right. Like as a young reporter coming up, I would look to the older, it's funny to think back to like my first newsroom and like the 30-year-old TV anchors who were so old and so wise, you know, their wine on the Charlottesville downtown mall. But, you know, I would look to them, or even when I was in Charlottesville and then West Virginia, similarly, like some of the older women would look out for me, but some of them saw me as, you know, nipping at their heels. And why should they fully go out of their way to really help me rise? Or in Washington, D.C., again, some amazing women anchors and reporters. And even I write in my book when I came to CNN, and it's a whole other crazy story for another IG Live about, you know, how I really wasn't hired for 2 years and like slapped a Post-it outside of a office I was essentially squatting in and not getting paid in, like so unglamorous. But, you know, the bureau chief in the Atlanta bureau at the time, again, she is someone who looked out for me, who, you know, took that Post-it, even though she probably would have gotten in trouble, and created a nameplate. Or, you know, the executive producer at the time for the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer was a woman, and someone I am dear friends with to this day, who, you know, put me on with Wolf for the first time. You know, and when you're on with Wolf Blitzer for the first time and you don't F it up, you know, you're going to get called from the other shows. And so the way she looked out for me, was extraordinary and helped me pave the path. But did I have like a bunch of other women anchors, you know, women on television who were older and more seasoned, who I really could have used, you know, some wisdom from? And here's how I got here, and here are the people you need to talk to. Like, it was kind of crickets. And I did expect that, Sheryl, because these were women who, you know, shattered their ceilings and forged the way, and why won't they help me? And it pissed me off. And so that is part of the reason why I am who I am. And when I was at CNN, would keep my office door open and respond to so many, you know, messages on Instagram to try to huddle with women and to encourage other women to huddle.
And it's a great thing to do. Now, you already brought this up. We have really big issues around race in our country and world. All the challenges women face, white women face, women of color have all of those biases against gender, and then all of those biases against race.
Yep.
It's a really lost opportunity. My foundation, Lean In with McKinsey, we do a survey of women in the workforce every year. It's the largest one. And what it says every year is that women of color are actually in many ways more ambitious. More of them as a percentage will say they want to be CEO. They want to get to the top. And yet they face even greater discrimination. So it's about huddling the responsibility we all have. White women, white men,
yep.
Black men, people of any background, to help not just women, but women of color is really deep. And you talk about that.
Yes.
That's the huddle we need. I'd love to hear your thoughts on
I mean, Intersectionality is everything. You know, I remember one of my favorite quotes in the entire book was from Sarah Hardin, a white woman. She's the CEO of Hello Sunshine. And I jotted her quote down because I wanted to get this exactly right. She says, we have to approach this, meaning like building a bigger table for women, from an intersectional perspective. If we just replace the patriarchy with white women, we change nothing. You know, you think back to, I'm not a historian, but I do know that, 100 years ago when we as women were fighting for the right to vote, like Black women and white women were fighting side by side. And at the end of the day, the Black women were abandoned and they didn't win the right to vote for 50 more years. And then ultimately through years and movements with white women, it's Fannie Lou Hamer who was quoted saying, nobody's free until everybody's free. And so we have to be so aware, we as white women, and I very much, here we are as white women talking, like very much checking my privilege as I talk to you and writing this book, that we have to be inclusive. You know this and you live this, but we have to make sure, like what I think, and I'm talking to myself too, like whether it's where I work, who's standing next to me, on a yoga mat, who's in my friend circle, who I'm following here on Instagram. Do they all look like me? Do they all believe the same things? And if it's yes, like it's time to diversify, because that's the only way to grow. And if I can just say one more thing, just a shout out to a woman I admire so much, Ava DuVernay. She is like a unicorn in Hollywood, in that she is this successful Black woman filmmaker. And I'm saying this to women in power who have who have hiring power. There are so many women and women of color who miss out on opportunities because of their resume, because they haven't gone to maybe like the right school or haven't checked all the boxes. And like using Ava as the example in Hollywood, because it's so white male, in Hollywood, she created Queen Sugar. Every single episode is directed by a woman or woman of color. And, she and other women I interviewed for this book, like, are not married to the resume. So if you find an extraordinary human who is incredibly talented, but hasn't maybe checked all the boxes, maybe consider elevating that person to then create a pipeline to bolster more women and more women of color in that industry. That's what I learned.
It's such a good point. One of the other things you talk about that meant a lot to me is you talk about women who are facing trauma. And I don't think it's possible for us to have a conversation today about women without acknowledging what's happening in Afghanistan and how scary the women there are and should be for rights they've fought for so long. So I just want to take a minute and recognize that. Now, when you write about trauma, I don't think we're talking about a situation like that. I don't think you're trying to cover that. But there are people who face real trauma in their lives, and then they need that resilience. And having faced, not like Afghanistan, but the sudden loss of a husband, the thing you talk about with resilience and huddling and supporting other people really meant a lot to me. And you really talk about how huddles help women who have faced trauma find resilience. I'd love for you to share some of our audience.
I read your book with Adam, Plan B. I thank you for asking me this. And I think, I did interview, everyone from the women who founded this practice called The Class, which is something I do each and every day, talking about their own personal trauma, to the survivors of the horrendous Larry Nassar abuse. Thank goodness he is locked away for a long time, to even, Black women who suffered their own trauma and are now coming together in this extraordinary group called Girl Trek to walk. Just the sheer act of walking together as Black women, whether it's in the wilderness or in their cities and their communities, is something in and of itself. And so I think like the phrase self-care, Sheryl, I think is it's a thing now, right? Everyone's talking about self-care, especially when it comes to women. It's almost like a buzzy thing. But what I've discovered through all my interviews in Huddle and these women who know real deep trauma is that the key is to have a sister circle of self-care. So what I'm talking about is women I interviewed, everything from, if we're talking sexual assault survivors, they would literally attend triggering doctor's appointments with one another. They will call one another and actually pick up the phone at all hours of the day. The Black women who are walking, just, making sure, reminding people to eat, to hydrate. It's, what's so radical about some of these huddles is these women, these sister circles are doing things that are just so basic, such basic needs that so many other people overlook. And so I think that's just a really important point on the Huddling to Heal chapter.
Yeah, I really loved that. And I love the title, Huddling to Heal. So close to
You
my
have a huddle, if I can jump in. And I mean,
yeah.
you're the ladies in your life. Like, didn't you recently, a couple months ago, finally all get together for the first time in a while?
Yeah, so nice to know that. Yeah, my girlfriends, who are my girlfriends from childhood, we've called each other the girls, and we are a lean in circle now. We meet virtually, but we got together for the first time for like over a year and a half.
Yeah.
So close to my heart, you started a Huddle Facebook group for women and I think for men who support them. Tell us what's happening.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked me about that. So, and just anyone who's watching over on Facebook, it's a huddle. You know, how to show the F up for one another. I wanted to create a huddle out of Huddle the book. In fact, not to go all like macro, but or micro, but the fact that some of these women actually, through reading the book, then through like this Huddle Facebook group, have now met in person. Which is just so special. You know, my whole thing is like, I want women to come together, to lean on one another, to use one another for advice, for healing, for wisdom. I mean, I know I, in my own life, am looking for this from women sitting here with you, you know, all the time. And so if anyone is watching and wants to jump on Facebook and join our Huddle group, you got to, you know, answer 3 really tough questions. Not really too tough. You got this. And then you can join in, and it's men and women. And I love hearing from the men. I love hearing from men who support women huddling. Seeing it is not like a bunch of girls getting together can be something so pejorative. And it's something so healing and so important, especially I think in the pandemic, that I invite everyone to join. Thanks for the shout out.
That's awesome. All right. So I'm going to ask you very quick lightning questions.
Ooh. Okay.
Ally you had as a young woman starting your career.
Sorry, I missed the first part of it. Say it again.
Ally you had as a young woman starting your career.
There was a woman, Stephanie Cornwell. That was her pre-married name, who was in Charlottesville, Virginia, who was the big 6 p.m. anchor, you know, the wise 30-year-old who totally took me under her wing and appreciated my loud and proud ambitions.
Favorite act of self-care?
Doing The Class, which has a digital platform. Just Google it. It's theclass.com every morning.
Favorite TV show you're watching right now?
Oh my gosh. Oh, Schitt's Creek. I'm like a late adapter. I'm now in the 6th season. I find myself slowing down because I don't want to lose all my Schitt's Creek friends. It is so good, and I'm obsessed with Moira.
Oh, that's hysterical. All right. I would love to ask women this question. Not that you're fearless, but one more thing.
No, I have lots of fear.
One more thing you would do if you weren't afraid.
What would I do when I'm not?
One more thing you would do if you weren't afraid.
Wow. Well, I've already kind of done a really scary thing by walking away from a perfectly great job. So I feel like I am living and being uncomfortable at the moment. So let's see, what would top that? I would just maybe just jump on a plane with a one-way ticket. Let's assume like the pandemic isn't you know, something that would stop me, and just travel. Take my nearest and dearest and just take them to the most extraordinary places. And I love opening my aperture to the world and learning from other people. And I would just fly around the world with my favorite friends and family.
Thank you, Brooke. Thank you.
Sheryl Sandberg. Thank you.
Hey, everyone, go read this. It's awesome.